What if I told you that your biggest obstacle in trading has nothing to do with the market itself? Not with indicators, not with volume, not even with news. It's you. You think you're here to conquer the charts, master the setups, and time the entries. But the real challenge is taming the chaos in your own mind. The disciplined trader opens with a wake up call you didn't ask for, but desperately need. The market is not the enemy. The enemy is your untrained response to uncertainty. You want to believe that if you just knew more, studied harder, or backtested better, you'd eliminate the confusion. But Douglas flips that completely. The market doesn't cause your confusion, it exposes it. You walk in expecting certainty, patterns, logic, and then you're surprised when price does something that feels irrational. But the market isn't irrational. It just doesn't care. It's a mirror, a brutal, honest, uncaring mirror of every fear, hope, assumption, and belief you carry into the trading day. So you react. You flinch when a candle turns red. You freeze when a breakout stalls. You hesitate when a setup appears, haunted by your last loss. You keep thinking, if I can just predict it better, I'll be okay. But that mindset is the problem. Trading isn't about prediction. It's about execution. And execution only thrives when you let go of the illusion that you can control the outcome. Douglas wants you to understand that the root of inconsistency isn't poor strategy, it's mental rigidity. You're trying to apply the same mental tools that worked in other parts of life to a domain where they don't belong. In school, work, relationships, you're trained to avoid mistakes, seek approval, and control results. But the market punishes that exact mindset. It doesn't reward effort. It doesn't care how badly you want it. It doesn't even punish you for doing the wrong thing sometimes. That randomness is exactly what drives you mad. That's why every trade feels like an emotional minefield. You're fighting to impose certainty on something that operates on probability. And the more you try to force control, the more volatile your emotional responses become. You overtrade. You cut winners. You hold losers. You avoid setups. You doubt everything. The market becomes the villain, when in truth, it's just responding to the imbalance you haven't yet resolved inside yourself. Douglas doesn't coddle you. He tells you flat out, your problems in trading are the result of the way you think. And that's not an insult. It's an invitation. Because if your thinking is the issue, then your mind is also the solution. The market isn't going to change, but you can. That's the foundational truth of the disciplined trader. It begins with owning the internal chaos instead of blaming external movement. If you keep chasing setups but never address your mental structure, you'll stay trapped in a loop of sabotage. Every time you break your rules, hesitate, panic, or chase, it's not because you lack skill. It's because you're carrying psychological baggage that's incompatible with the realities of trading, and no setup will compensate for that. Douglas wants you to stop asking, what's wrong with this market? And start asking, what's unresolved in me that makes this so hard to execute? The truth is brutal but liberating. The market is not out to get you. It just doesn't care. And when you finally stop trying to extract certainty from it, when you finally stop demanding that the market behave a certain way, you'll find something shocking. Peace. Not because the market changed, but because you stopped fighting its nature. You stopped making it personal. You stopped interpreting random price movement as a personal attack. That shift is the beginning of discipline. And that discipline doesn't depend on market behavior. It depends on mental sovereignty. Your job is not to beat the market. Your job is to stop making your performance a referendum on your self-worth. Your job is to show up with a clear plan, act on it without fear, and accept the outcome without judgment. That's what it means to become a trader in alignment with market truth, not your emotional truth. And once you do, the chaos doesn't disappear, but it no longer controls you. You weren't born thinking like a losing trader, but you were trained into it, slowly, persistently, by everything society taught you about success, failure, and control. From your earliest years, you were rewarded for being right, punished for being wrong, praised for knowing the answer, and scolded for making mistakes. In school, at home, even in your friendships, being correct equaled safety. And being wrong, that brought pain, shame, or judgment. So you developed a belief system: avoid mistakes at all costs. That training might have helped you get good grades or please authority figures, but in the market, it's deadly. That conditioning makes you vulnerable in markets because the market doesn't reward being right. It rewards being adaptable. It rewards probabilities, not certainties. But your mind, trained for decades to crave control and correctness, resists this at every turn. You enter trades needing them to work. You interpret losses as proof of inadequacy. You try to impose structure on something inherently random. And when the market violates your expectation, the emotional fallout isn't small. It's enormous. It feels like a betrayal. It feels like something has gone wrong. But what's really happening is that your inner programming, designed for a different game, is now being shredded by a reality it was never built to handle. Douglas makes it clear: your inner world has been programmed to reject randomness. But trading is randomness, so your default mental programming is in direct conflict with the nature of the market. Think about that. You were trained to believe that control equals safety. But in trading, control is an illusion. You cannot control price. You cannot control outcome. The only thing you can control is your behavior in response to uncertainty. And most traders never learn to do that because they're too busy fighting for certainty in a place where it doesn't exist. Let's make it simple. You were raised to avoid failure. So when a trade fails, it's not just a loss, it's a personal attack on your identity. It means you're bad, wrong, stupid, or not good enough. That self-judgment hijacks your ability to execute the next trade. You hesitate, you avoid, you chase to make up for it. The trauma loop begins. And it all stems from one false belief: that losses equal failure. Douglas says the only way out is reprogramming, not surface-level mantras, deep rewiring of what it means to lose and what it means to win. Because as long as your sense of self is tied to outcome, you'll never trade with freedom. You'll always be imprisoned by the fear of being wrong. And here's the hardest truth: even if you intellectually understand this, your emotions don't. That's why you keep doing the same things. You swear you'll be disciplined. You create rules. You journal. But in the moment, the pressure hits and the programming takes over. That inner child who's afraid of being wrong grabs the wheel. Suddenly, you're abandoning your plan. You're trying to be right again, just like you were trained. And then the market humbles you again. Douglas doesn't offer pity. He offers clarity. He shows you that unless you confront this internal training, it will sabotage you forever. He says the problem is not your intellect, it's your emotional framework. And to change that, you have to become emotionally comfortable with uncertainty. You have to strip away your attachment to being right. You have to stop needing the market to prove something about you. Because until you do, every trade will be a threat. Every red candle will feel like failure. Every loss will feel like a blow to your worth. And as long as that's true, you won't be free. You won't be consistent. You'll be reactive. That's why mindset work isn't optional. It's survival. It's the real edge. Strategies come and go. Setups evolve. But emotional conditioning, that's the lever most traders never touch. They chase more information when what they need is transformation. If you want to trade like a professional, you have to stop acting like a student trying to pass a test. You're not here to be right. You're here to respond skillfully to a chaotic environment with consistency. And that begins with retraining the very framework you were taught to trust. Every time you place a trade, you expose yourself to risk. Not just financial risk, but emotional risk. That's the part most traders miss. You think you're managing dollars, but really, you're managing discomfort. And the less comfortable you are with uncertainty, the more desperate you become to eliminate it. That's why you chase indicators, over-optimize strategies, or hunt for someone else's signals. You're not trying to trade better. You're trying to avoid the pain of not knowing. Mark Douglas is brutally clear about this. Fear is not a response to the market. Fear is a response to your beliefs about what uncertainty means. And if you grew up believing that not knowing equals danger, or that being wrong equals shame, then the market becomes a constant emotional threat. Every tick against your position feels like judgment. Every red candle feels like a warning siren. So you react not to price, but to the meaning you assign to price. That's the core illusion. You believe the market is doing something to you. But the market is neutral, completely, utterly indifferent. It's not against you. It's not testing you. It doesn't even know you exist. But your beliefs make it personal. Douglas says, the market's only job is to provide opportunity. Your job is to respond to that opportunity without distortion. But if fear clouds your vision, you can't see clearly. You'll anticipate threats where none exist. You'll protect yourself from phantom dangers. You'll misinterpret randomness as risk and risk as danger. And in doing so, you'll sabotage your ability to execute. This is why risk management isn't just about position sizing, it's about emotional survival. You need to risk only what your nervous system can handle, not your account, your nervous system. Because if your body is in a state of panic, it doesn't matter how solid your plan is. You won't execute it. You'll freeze. You'll flinch. You'll abandon it. Not because the setup is bad, but because your internal state is in chaos. And here's where the illusion of control becomes lethal. You want to believe that if you can just get it right, the pain will stop. So you try to eliminate randomness. You search for the perfect filter, the magic confluence, the guru's secret. But what you're really doing is bargaining with your fear. You're saying, please don't make me face the unknown. Douglas tells you, stop. Stop trying to remove risk. Start learning how to hold risk. That's the skill. That's the path. Because discipline doesn't mean you feel no fear. It means you act with clarity despite it. It means you accept the risk fully, consciously, before you ever enter the trade. It means you stop asking the market for reassurance. You stop waiting for it to confirm your feelings. You make peace with the unknown. You embrace the possibility of loss without letting it define you. And when you do that, something changes. You're no longer a hostage to outcome. You're no longer afraid of red candles. You're free to play the game, not because it's safe, but because you've made peace with the danger. That's what Douglas means when he says, the best traders have no expectation. Not because they don't care, but because they've learned to separate their identity from their trades. They've learned that risk is the cost of participation, not a personal verdict. And once you internalize that, fear loses its grip. Because now you're no longer trying to win, you're trying to execute. You're not judging yourself on results, you're judging yourself on alignment with your plan. That shift changes everything. You stop chasing certainty, you start cultivating neutrality. You stop interpreting every tick emotionally, you start responding mechanically, mindfully. You become less attached but more intentional, less impulsive but more present. And from that place, real discipline begins. Not forced discipline, not white-knuckling, but grounded, embodied discipline that flows from an acceptance of the game you're actually playing, not the fantasy you wish it was. You act on what you believe, even when you don't realize it. In trading, your beliefs shape every click, every hesitation, every moment you move toward or away from risk. But here's the trap. Most of your trading beliefs were never chosen consciously. They were absorbed, inherited, or built in response to emotionally charged moments. That means they operate like invisible scripts, running the show beneath your awareness. And until you examine them, they dictate your trading behavior, no matter how much education or strategy you pile on top. Douglas says a belief is not just an idea, it's a feeling of certainty about how the world works. And in trading, those beliefs determine how you interpret price, how you handle losses, how you react to wins. Think about it. If you believe that losses mean failure, you'll fear them. If you believe that being right equals worth, you'll obsess over accuracy. If you believe the market owes you something, you'll become resentful and revengeful. So the key isn't just knowing strategies, it's knowing yourself. Because what you believe about the market becomes how you behave in it. And most beliefs don't scream, they whisper. They show up in subtle ways. You hesitate before entering a valid setup. You size up too much after a win. You skip trades after a loss. Why? Because some part of you has internalized a message. Maybe that message is, you're not good enough, or you always mess it up, or play it safe or get hurt. These are not facts. They're beliefs. But if they're unexamined, they become your reality. Douglas teaches that beliefs are formed through emotional intensity and repetition. That means your biggest trading wounds, those big losses, humiliating failures, missed opportunities, are the birthplace of the beliefs that now drive your fear. You learned to avoid pain, and you encoded rules to survive. But those rules may no longer serve you. They were built to protect your ego, not to maximize your edge. That's why self-awareness is the most underrated skill in trading. Not chart awareness, not market awareness, self-awareness. You need to know which parts of you are running the show. Is it the disciplined adult trader or the scared inner child trying to not get hurt again? Because if you don't know, the child wins every time. So how do you change a belief? Not by arguing with it, not by stuffing new information into your brain and hoping it overrides the old stuff. Douglas insists that belief change requires two things: exposure and evidence. You have to put yourself in the exact situations that challenge the old belief. You have to feel the discomfort, and then you have to act differently, repeatedly. When you do that, you give your nervous system new evidence. You prove on a visceral level that the old belief is not the only way. Let's say you believe that a string of losses means you're bad at trading. That belief triggers fear after a few red trades. So you stop trading. You sabotage valid setups. You protect your ego, but destroy your consistency. To shift that belief, you have to keep trading through the losses, with size you can emotionally handle. Not to prove anything, but to show your system that discomfort isn't danger, that you can feel uncertainty and still act, that you can lose money and still be okay, that you can be wrong and still be a disciplined trader. That's real evidence. That's how you train the nervous system to trust a new story. That's how beliefs change, not through books, through experience, through choices made in the fire. Douglas knew this. The trader you want to become isn't found in more knowledge. It's found in more honesty. Honesty about what you believe. Honesty about what you avoid. Honesty about who's really making the decisions when you click the button. This is why trading is a mirror. It doesn't just show you your edge, it shows you your wounds, your hopes, your illusions. And your beliefs, especially the ones you deny, will be exposed. That's not a punishment. It's a gift. Because once they're visible, they're changeable. And once you change them, your behavior follows. Not through willpower, through alignment. You've been here before. You start the week strong, patient, focused, disciplined. But then something shifts. One mistake, one revenge trade, one over-leveraged setup that didn't work out. And suddenly, it's Friday, and you're staring at a red P&L, wondering how the same story keeps repeating. This is the emotional loop Douglas warns you about. Because unless you break the cycle of self-sabotage, no amount of strategy will save you. The problem isn't your edge, it's the emotional pattern that hijacks your mind the moment discomfort shows up. You think it's random. You tell yourself it's just a bad day or the market was weird. But if you zoom out, you'll see the pattern. You lose, then you overtrade. You win big, then you get cocky. You hesitate after a loss. You size up too fast after a win. These aren't one-offs. They're signals. Emotional echoes of old beliefs. And unless you bring them to the surface, they run the show. Douglas explains it like this. The market is the perfect trigger for unresolved emotions. It mirrors your inner state. If you're insecure, the market will amplify it. If you're greedy, the market will bait you. If you're fearful, the market will taunt you. And unless you're centered, those emotional triggers will pull you into self-destruction. This is why consistency is so elusive. It's not that traders don't know what to do. It's that they don't do what they know. Not because they're lazy, but because they're emotionally addicted to the cycle. There's a part of you that finds comfort in the chaos. A part of you that feels alive in the drama. And until you unhook from that emotional roller coaster, you'll unconsciously recreate it over and over again. Douglas emphasizes the need to monitor your state like you monitor your charts, not occasionally, constantly, because your mental state is your most important indicator. Are you grounded or reactive, curious or controlling, detached or desperate? Those internal readings tell you more about your readiness to trade than any candlestick ever could. And if you ignore them, you trade blind. You might hit a winner now and then, but you won't sustain success because eventually the pattern catches up. So, how do you interrupt it? First, by becoming ruthlessly honest about your triggers. What sets you off? What conditions make you break your rules? Is it boredom, fear of missing out, needing to make it back? Track it, journal it, name it. Because the more awareness you bring to the pattern, the less power it has. You can't change what you won't admit. But once you do, the pattern starts to crack. Then, you replace reactivity with routine. You create structure around your trading. Pre-trade checklists, emotional baselines, cool-down periods after big wins or losses. These aren't just mechanical hacks, they're emotional safeguards. They give your nervous system something to hold on to when the chaos hits. Because chaos will hit. And when it does, you need more than willpower. You need systems. Douglas also suggests redefining success. Most traders measure success in money. That's the trap. Because money is an outcome. And if you measure yourself by outcome, you become vulnerable to randomness. But if you measure success by execution, by alignment with your plan, then you take your power back. You stop chasing dopamine. You start chasing discipline. You learn to walk away green in your mind, even if the trade was red. That's emotional profit. That's how you win long term. And when you start thinking like that, the cycle begins to shift. You catch the urge before it becomes action. You pause. You breathe. You downsize. You wait. You walk. You do the thing that your old self would have never done. And that's the moment the pattern breaks. Not because the market changed, but because you did. Risk isn't the enemy, but your perception of it might be. That's the paradox Douglas reveals. The more you fear risk, the more power it holds over you. And in trading, fear-based perception distorts reality. It makes you see danger where there is none, or miss opportunity because of imagined threats. You might think you're being careful, but in truth, you're just avoiding discomfort. And as long as discomfort equals danger in your mind, you'll never trade freely. Not because of the market, but because of the stories your mind has linked to risk. Most traders enter the market seeking certainty. They want setups that guarantee outcomes. They crave control. But here's the hard truth. The market is inherently uncertain. Every trade is a unique event. No pattern, no setup, no edge is guaranteed. And the more you try to control what can't be controlled, the more frustrated and fearful you become. Douglas calls this the illusion of control, and it's the root of most emotional pain in trading. You suffer not because of risk, but because you expect the market to give you something it was never meant to give: predictability. This is why reprogramming your perception of risk is so crucial. You have to train your mind to see risk not as a threat, but as an invitation, a space of possibility, a chance to express your edge, not to prove something, not to win, but to participate in the flow of probability. When you shift your relationship with risk, everything changes. You stop reacting to fear. You start responding to opportunity. Douglas insists that this shift begins with redefining what a loss means. If you see a loss as punishment, you'll fear it. If you see it as feedback, you'll learn from it. If you see it as failure, you'll avoid it. If you see it as tuition, you'll pay it willingly. The meaning you attach to losses determines how you experience them and how you behave afterward. So the work isn't just on strategy, it's on meaning. You must become the author of your own narrative around loss instead of inheriting the one from your ego. And then there's the emotional charge behind risk, that visceral tension in your chest before you click the button, that spike of adrenaline as price moves against you, that voice that screams, "Get out, protect yourself." All of it is rooted in biology. Your nervous system has equated uncertainty with threat. And unless you train it otherwise, it will override your logic every time. Douglas advises exposure. Start small. Take trades that are well within your risk tolerance, not just financially, but emotionally. And then observe. Sit with the discomfort. Don't run from it. Don't suppress it. Breathe through it. Let your nervous system see that nothing terrible happens when you stay grounded. It's not enough to know that risk is part of the game. You have to feel safe taking it. And safety comes from evidence, from repeated action under pressure, from choosing to hold your plan instead of bailing out, from surviving the discomfort. Each time you stay in alignment, even when you're afraid, you give your body new data. You teach it that risk isn't death, that discomfort isn't disaster, that you can feel fear and still act with clarity. This is the gateway to freedom. Not the freedom to always be right, but the freedom to trade without emotional shackles, to take setups without attachment, to lose without spiraling, to win without inflating, to flow with the market, not against it. And that kind of freedom doesn't come from avoiding risk. It comes from leaning into it on your terms. You want consistency. You want confidence. But those things don't come from strategy alone. They come from belief. Beliefs are the filters through which you interpret everything in trading: wins, losses, setups, mistakes. If your beliefs are rooted in fear, scarcity, or ego, you'll twist every market experience to reinforce those narratives. You'll take normal drawdowns as proof you're not good enough. You'll see missed trades as personal failures. You'll view every mistake as a threat to your identity. But the truth is, you don't trade the market. You trade your beliefs about the market. Douglas makes it clear. Your trading behavior isn't driven by logic, it's driven by belief. And most of those beliefs aren't conscious. They were absorbed from childhood, society, and past experience. They lie beneath the surface, shaping your reactions long before you have a chance to think. You might believe that success has to be hard, that winning means proving your worth, that losing is shameful, that perfection is necessary. These beliefs don't just live in your mind, they live in your body. They trigger emotions, they shape expectations, they run your trading life from the shadows. This is why some traders can follow rules flawlessly on demo, but sabotage themselves with real money. The belief system changes. With real money on the line, all the unresolved emotions, doubts, and subconscious patterns come flooding in. And unless those beliefs are examined and rewritten, they override everything. That's why Douglas urges you to look inward, to question the stories you tell yourself about trading. Not just the market, but about yourself. One of the most destructive beliefs is the idea that your value as a person is tied to your trading results. This belief creates pressure. It creates anxiety. It makes you need to win in order to feel okay. And that need turns trading into a minefield. You hesitate. You force trades. You abandon plans because deep down you're not trading your system. You're trading your self-worth. And the more pressure you carry into the market, the more fragile your execution becomes. Douglas recommends building belief systems that support emotional neutrality. Beliefs like, losses are part of the game. My job is to execute my edge. No single trade defines me. These aren't affirmations, they're frameworks. They help your mind interpret experiences in a way that reduces friction. They allow you to stay grounded in the storm, and over time, they become your default lenses. But belief systems don't shift overnight. They require repetition. They require emotional proof. They require intention. So how do you install new beliefs? You start small. You choose a single principle, like honoring your stop loss, and you commit to it. Not just once, but consistently. Every time you honor it, you create evidence, and that evidence builds trust. Not just in the system, but in yourself. That's how belief shifts. Not through motivation, but through integrity. Through choosing alignment when it's hard, through proving to yourself that your word matters. Douglas calls this process retraining your mental environment. It's not about suppressing fear. It's about building trust in your ability to act in the presence of fear. It's not about eliminating doubt. It's about proving that you can stay consistent even when doubt whispers. Every disciplined action becomes a brick in your foundation. Every moment of restraint becomes a vote for the trader you're becoming. Because in the end, it's not your edge that makes you successful. It's your ability to express that edge consistently, regardless of emotion. And that consistency is built on belief. Belief in your rules, belief in your plan, but most of all, belief in yourself. Not the ego-driven belief that you're special, but the quiet, grounded belief that you are capable of showing up with clarity again and again. That belief is earned, and once you've earned it, you become unshakable. Douglas calls this process retraining your mental environment. It's not about suppressing fear. It's about building trust in your ability to act in the presence of fear. It's not about eliminating doubt. It's about proving that you can stay consistent even when doubt whispers. Every disciplined action becomes a brick in your foundation. Every moment of restraint becomes a vote for the trader you're becoming. Because in the end, it's not your edge that makes you successful. It's your ability to express that edge consistently, regardless of emotion. And that consistency is built on belief. Belief in your rules, belief in your plan. But most of all, belief in yourself. Not the ego-driven that you're special, but the quiet, grounded belief that you are capable of showing up with clarity again and again. That belief is earned. And once you've earned it, you become unshakable. You think emotional mastery means not feeling anything. That real traders are stoic robots who never flinch when price moves against them. But Douglas shatters that illusion. Emotional mastery isn't about suppression. It's about relationship. How you relate to your emotions determines whether you're reactive or composed. And trading, more than any other field, exposes your emotional wiring. One wrong candle and you're back in childhood. One red day and you're questioning your worth. That's not a sign you're weak. It's a sign you're human. Most traders try to fight their emotions. They treat fear as an enemy. They shame themselves for hesitation. They try to outthink their pain. But what you resist only grows stronger. If you deny fear, it hijacks you from the shadows. If you shame yourself for anger, it turns inward. You can't trade cleanly while battling your inner world. That's why Douglas advocates integration. You bring awareness to the emotion. You observe it without judgment. You accept that it's present, but you don't obey it. You create space between the feeling and the action. And in that space, you take your power back. This shift requires honesty. You must become radically aware of how you feel and why. You must track your emotional triggers, the setups that make you overconfident, the losses that make you spiral, the boredom that makes you overtrade. Every emotion is a signal, not of what's happening in the market, but of what's happening in your mind. Douglas teaches that the market reflects nothing back to you but yourself. It gives you no information, no truth, only opportunity. You assign the meaning, and the meaning you assign reveals everything about your internal state. This is why emotional mastery is inseparable from self-trust. If you don't trust yourself to act in alignment with your rules, your emotions will dominate you. You'll hesitate, second guess, bail early, revenge trade. You'll find a way to exit the discomfort, even if it wrecks your edge. But when you trust yourself, when you've proven to your nervous system that you can feel intense emotions and still follow through, that's when you become free. Not free from emotion, but free from its tyranny. Douglas emphasizes journaling as a path to this mastery. Not just logging trades, but logging feelings. Not just outcomes, but inner experiences. What did you feel before the entry? What narratives surfaced during the hold? What did you tell yourself at the exit? The point isn't to become a psychologist, it's to bring your blind spots into the light. Because what stays hidden will always control you. And what you bring to awareness, you can transform. Over time, this practice builds what Douglas calls emotional objectivity. The ability to see yourself clearly without flinching, to notice the fear without becoming it, to catch the self-sabotage before it executes, to pause long enough to ask, is this action aligned with my edge or with my emotion? That gap, that moment of awareness, is everything. It's the difference between a blown account and a small loss, between panic and poise, between hope and professionalism. But this mastery isn't glamorous. It's not exciting. It's not something you flex on social media. It's slow. It's quiet. It happens in silence, in the space between stimulus and response. It's forged in 1,000 tiny moments of awareness, 1,000 micro decisions to act with integrity. And every time you choose alignment over emotion, you shift your identity. You stop being the trader who reacts and become the trader who responds. That's what Douglas means by transformation. Not behavior modification, but identity shift. You don't just change how you trade. You change who you are when you trade. You become the kind of person who can hold risk without flinching, who can lose and stay grounded, who can win without chasing. And that kind of trader isn't made in a day. They're made in practice. They're made in reflection. They're made in the fire of emotion, met with presence. You crave certainty. You want to know what will happen next. You scan the charts, read the news, measure the volume, hoping for signs, hoping for control. But here's the brutal truth. Certainty doesn't exist in the market, and your attachment to it is the root of your suffering. That's why Douglas calls it out relentlessly. The need to know, the need to be right, the need for validation through outcomes. These aren't harmless desires, they're liabilities. They distort your thinking, increase your risk, and sabotage your growth. When you demand certainty from an uncertain environment, you're at war with reality. And reality always wins. You tell yourself that more information will save you, that if you just learn more, analyze better, wait longer, you'll finally find the signal that guarantees success. But what you're really doing is stalling. You're trading for emotional safety, not statistical edge. You're avoiding the real work, which is embracing the fact that anything can happen at any time and still being willing to act. That's what separates the professionals. Not their tools, not their predictions, but their relationship to uncertainty, their ability to move decisively without knowing. Douglas explains that traders who succeed long-term don't crave certainty. They cultivate probability thinking. They accept randomness. They accept that every trade is a unique event with its own set of variables and outcomes. And they stop trying to control what can't be controlled. Instead, they focus on what can: execution, risk, mindset, process. These are the only domains where control exists. And once you commit to that, you free yourself from the exhausting cycle of prediction and regret. Letting go of the need to know also means letting go of your identity as the smart one, or the analyst, or the one who's always right. Because that identity will make you cling to trades that are clearly failing. It will make you ignore your stop. It will make you add to losers out of pride. Douglas says that when your sense of self is tied to being correct, you become rigid. And rigidity is fatal in trading. The market isn't loyal to your ego. It doesn't care about your thesis. It punishes those who cling. It rewards those who adapt. So you have a choice. You can continue chasing the illusion of certainty, bending your rules for the sake of prediction, or you can surrender to the game you're actually playing, the game of probability. You're not trying to be right. You're trying to make good bets. You're not trying to win every time. You're trying to execute your edge over time. And that mindset is what gives you durability. Because when you stop tying your worth to outcomes, you become less reactive, less emotional, more agile. Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means focusing on what matters. Douglas calls this the zone of control. Your preparation, your risk per trade, your plan, your execution, these are yours. But what the market does, not yours. What the outcome is, not yours. You have influence, not control. And once you stop trying to control what's beyond you, you release an immense amount of mental pressure. You become more present, more attuned, more capable of responding with clarity instead of reacting out of fear. Douglas also warns against the trap of certainty-seeking strategies. You know the type. Strategies that promise 90% win rates, never lose indicators, or perfect setups. These strategies sell comfort, not truth, and they keep traders stuck in a cycle of dependency. Always looking for the next holy grail, always afraid to take risk unless the setup feels perfect. But perfection doesn't exist in trading. Waiting for it is just fear in disguise, and chasing it is a guaranteed path to frustration. What Douglas suggests instead is developing what he calls a belief in uncertainty, not just intellectually, but emotionally. You internalize the truth that the outcome of any given trade is unknown and unknowable. You build psychological habits around acting in spite of that uncertainty. You don't need all the lights to be green. You just need a setup that meets your criteria, and then you take the trade. That's where your freedom lies. Not in knowing, but in acting without knowing. Over time, this creates a profound mental shift. You stop obsessing over what if. You stop checking trades every 5 seconds. You stop spiraling when the market moves against you. Because you're no longer trying to be right. You're trying to be consistent. And when you measure success by execution rather than outcome, your mind quiets down. The fear fades, the desperation evaporates. You stop clenching so tightly, and in that relaxed state, you make better decisions. You find flow. You enter the zone, not the mythical state of perfect focus, but the real zone where you are fully present, emotionally neutral, and deeply aligned with the process. That is the essence of true trading freedom. You think discipline is about restriction, about forcing yourself to obey rules you secretly resent, about becoming robotic, emotionless, stiff. But Douglas turns that idea upside down. Real discipline isn't about control, it's about liberation. It's not about suppressing impulses. It's about becoming someone who no longer needs to. A trader who is so aligned with their process that temptation no longer pulls. A trader who doesn't have to resist because there's nothing left to resist. Becoming the disciplined trader isn't a skill set, it's an identity shift. You don't wake up and apply discipline like a bandage. You become someone who embodies it. And the way you become that person, according to Douglas, is through practice. Not just in trading, but in your relationship with your own mind. Every trade becomes a mirror, every reaction a signal, every temptation an invitation to see where you still haven't let go of control, ego, fear, or validation. Discipline starts with clarity. You can't act with consistency if your rules are vague, your edge is undefined, or your goals are rooted in fantasy. Douglas insists on precision. Define your edge. Define your process. Define your risk. And once it's defined, act on it without deviation. Not because it guarantees success, but because that's how you build trust with yourself. Every act of follow-through is a vote for your future identity. Every act of discipline tells your subconscious, this is who I am now. But that identity can't coexist with your current coping mechanisms. If you use trading to feel significant, to prove yourself, to escape boredom, or to seek revenge, you will sabotage discipline the moment it threatens those emotional payoffs. So Douglas forces you to face those motivations, to bring your unconscious needs into the light. Because until you address what trading represents to you psychologically, you'll keep breaking your rules in the name of emotional survival. You'll keep treating trading like a battlefield for your self-worth instead of a probability game. This is why many traders plateau. They develop the technicals, they build a system, but they never build the inner foundation to support it. And without that foundation of self-awareness, of emotional literacy, of identity work, they fall apart under pressure. They panic in volatility. They overtrade after losses. They skip trades when afraid, all because the internal structure hasn't changed. Douglas says it clearly. The market doesn't make you do anything. It simply shows you where you are. So how do you become the disciplined trader? Not through willpower, through self-honesty. You track your behavior. You journal your impulses. You analyze your errors, not to punish, but to understand. You stop hiding from your patterns and start mining them for insight. You stop seeking control in the market and start cultivating control over your own responses. And the more you do this, the more predictable you become to yourself. And the more predictable you become, the more stable your results. This is what Douglas calls developing internal consistency, the ability to act the same way across trades, across days, across outcomes. Not because you're emotionless, but because you've trained yourself to value process over outcome, presence over prediction, truth over comfort. And that consistency is what creates edge, not your strategy, not your indicators, not your market calls, but your ability to show up again and again without being thrown off course. Over time, this level of discipline becomes effortless. Not because you've numbed yourself, but because you've reconditioned yourself. You no longer fear losses. You no longer chase wins. You no longer trade to fix your feelings. You've removed the emotional noise. You've simplified the game. And in that simplicity, you find freedom. You trade what's there. You accept what comes. You release what leaves. You move on with no residue. This is the final transformation Douglas leads you to. Not just a better trader, but a better human. Someone who doesn't react from fear. Someone who doesn't cling to ego. Someone who understands the value of detachment, the beauty of uncertainty, and the power of self-mastery. Because ultimately, trading is a practice, a spiritual practice, a mirror that reflects your deepest truths. And if you let it, It can be your greatest teacher, not just in markets, but in life.